What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orrego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
It's the Spill the Tea podcast with Will and Maria, and it's great to be back with you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here too, and we get to celebrate Pride Month together.
It's officially June, and for those who might be living under a rock, it is Pride Month, which is always an exciting month, to celebrate our beautiful 2S LGBTQ plus community and share some stories, which we're going to get into in a second. However, before we dive into that, I just want to give a shout out to one of our Spill the Tea podcast listeners who literally is a day one listener, follower, fan of the show. Now, this is what she said. She sent us this week. So hello, Jen, for always listening. She said, I have to say that I love this podcast, and not just because of Will. He was why I started, but I kept listening because you guys talk so openly about things. I think what Jen is saying is, Maria, she's over me. She's on to you now.
She's on to me. She came because of you. She stayed because of me, right? We can say that.
Exactly. Yeah, I lured her in, but you've kept her here.
I love it. It's such a beautiful comment, right? Because it is true. That's what we were trying to do. I know that when you and I chatted about doing this podcast, we wanted to make sure that we were having raw, honest, transparent conversations, not only about ourselves, but also about what's going on in the world, about relationships and sex and all that stuff. So it's lovely to hear that we've got some people that are listening and really taking that to heart.
Yeah, when I opened up that message actually last weekend, I saw that and I kind of had a moment where I was like, wow, that's kind of exactly what our goal is and has been since the beginning of this podcast. And I hope that we just get to dive into things and, kind of pull back the layers of our onions, more and more and more each week, which I guess is kind of what we're doing today. We want to tell people listening that if you're listening all this month, we're going to be kind of highlighting some content that ties into Pride, the LGBT community, allies of the community, and of course the fun stuff that comes with it as well. And I guess we're kind of sharing stories today.
We are sharing stories. I'm actually really excited and super honored. And for those of you listening, I actually have never heard Will's coming out story. So today we're going to focus on actually hearing Will's story. And I am so excited and honored. And we have not prepped. We have not asked any questions before. I have zero notes. We're kind of going into a pseudo therapy session right now on this episode.
I don't even know if it's pseudo. I feel like it's full on therapy session. We just happen to be recording it for hopefully a lot of people to be listening to and be watching. So, but I'm down. I'm game, this is a challenge for me too, a personal challenge to completely expose myself in any way possible. But I also hope that sharing this, even helps one person, because that's always my goal. Anytime that I've shared a coming out story to a friend on the radio, on a podcast, in a video, that sincerely, and if you know me, is always my goal. If only one person hears this and it has a takeaway, then my job is done.
Yeah, I love that. Do you remember hearing stories about people coming out when you were growing up? I know it was a different life back then, right? I mean, you and I are 80s and 90s babies, but do you think that you remember some of those stories?
I'm trying to remember. I feel like I don't, off the top of my head, I don't really remember a whole lot of those stories. The things that make me think about the earlier days is I remember one of the first gay kisses was on Dawson's Creek. And it was, right? And it was such a big deal. Jack, I believe his name was Jack on the show.
His name was Jack, yeah.
Yeah. And he was hot. but he had a gay kiss on the show, and it was a big, big deal. Of course, everyone remembers, Ellen and her show and what she had done. And I mean, a lot of the trash talk shows at the time too were highlighting some things about the community, or almost, but you know what though, obviously in a way that was completely truth, but also over exaggerated just for ratings in many ways. But in terms of seeing people's coming out stories, I don't really from a respectful point, I don't really remember a whole lot of that. Like, I mean, I remember like Perez Hilton, who was awful, would often like out all these celebrities before
Yes.
they were wanting to come out or willing to come out. But I don't remember coming out. Like, do you? To put
No, because I don't think people actually shared as much either, right? And we didn't have social media, so unless it was like an interview and like you never really knew what the magazines if they were real or not, right? When it came to stories, you never knew if it was like a true story or not. I don't remember a lot of coming out stories. I remember friends like telling me that they were coming
yeah.
out. Like I do remember those stories, like more of the personal ones, but nothing that I would say like in the media or anything like that. Do you remember your friends coming out, or do you feel like you were the only one having kind of these thoughts and feelings about your own body and like what your sexuality was?
I remember like much later. So I was definitely like 18 or 19 and meeting a couple of like friends through friends. And one particular mutual friend was gay and I hadn't come out at that point. And I was more so like mesmerized by him, not so much in a sense of like that I even had a crush on him or anything like that. I felt like I was quietly like asking questions and probably being really inquisitive. I didn't necessarily see myself like I didn't feel like I was the same as him, but I felt that I think in at that point I was very curious about things that were going on. And again, like I did go to a Catholic high school, a Catholic grade school. I feel like even then, there were not many people who I knew who were openly gay. It
Mm,
was more so, unfortunately, people were making assumptions and, about people. I mean, honestly, like people were probably making assumptions about me too. Like, let's be real, right? I'm at a point where I can joke about that, but and that's okay. That's okay. But I don't really remember a whole man. I'm trying to rack my brain over that, but off the top of my head, I think people just more so, and honestly, like that's at a time too where like if you were called gay, it was perceived as
mm,
an insult. A
yes.
lesbian, it was perceived as an insult. You were
Yeah.
hearing kids in the schoolyard saying, "That's so gay. You're
Mhm.
so gay." Kind of had,
Uh,
again, at that time, a negative connotation towards it.
mhm.
Cringy to say it out loud now, but it's true. Like, that was sort of the, perception. And even in the media, like, you had, I mean, who did you have at the time? Like, maybe like an Elton John or something
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
that. And he was just, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel like there was a lot. It wasn't really until, again, social media,
Mhm.
the hashtag coming out stories, it'll be okay, like all those sort of things that really began to create awareness for it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I felt. Yeah, entertainment, a little bit of entertainment. I mean, we talked about that a little bit on our sex talk show, but
Yeah. Okay, so if we go all the way back to like when you were a kid,
oh
do you
god.
remember like the first time that you had like an inclination or like usually people say that they start feeling it when like their friends are like, "Oh my gosh, she's so hot," or "He's so hot," and then like they're not feeling the same kind of inclination or attraction towards people. Do you remember having those conversations and being like, "Oh, this is strange. I feel different."
It's funny because I've tried to think about this because I had a feeling that you would go there. And one of the things that when I think back to my early days as a kid and even through my adolescence is always feeling very different. Like I didn't feel like I fit in with the same group of people who I was surrounded by. For example, and there's some stereotypes here, right? I wasn't good or all that interested in sports. I had family members and friends who were playing hockey and baseball and soccer and all of these things. Now, my parents did put myself and my sisters into soccer. I was more concerned with, okay, were we having to worry about the orange slices this week? Or, when can we take a break? Because like being super uncoordinated, like seriously. And, I mean, I want to say, did these shorts look cute? But I wasn't even really thinking that at that point, to be honest with you. But
No, you were
uh,
thinking about the snacks. I love the snack time. Where when are the snacks
yeah.
coming out?
When are this? I'm thirsty. I
Yeah,
ran up and down the field here, like so I mean,
yeah.
barely ran up and down the field. But anyway, and then kind of being the only one who wasn't necessarily athletically inclined. I
Okay.
noticed, and it was okay. People were talking about hockey and all that stuff, and I just be like, yeah, I don't really care. And then I remember like I was doing, my parent because I wanted to. Like I ended up doing this art class. I ended up doing this like theater class, and like here's one like indication that I was gay. And I was so proud of this moment and still proud of it was I did a scene from The Wizard of Oz in the theater class where half of me was Dorothy and then I flipped around and the other half of me was the Wicked Witch of the West. Like, come on.
Oh my God, you're right though. You are kind of like going right into the stereotypes for us right
I
now.
know.
Of
I
like the
know.
coming out story was very stereotypical in that
It,
way.
it, it was, but it was also like, I know that there's so many I mean I loved pop music, like all those stereotypes and still do, right? Like I'm pretty sure like, you know, the first albums I had were like Paul Abdul, Janet Jackson, Mariah Carey.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Do you think
Again,
parents knew? Do you think your parents had an idea that this was like your sexuality and the way that you identified? Or do you think, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? I'm sure your parents look back and they're like, oh, there were signs. But do you think they knew during that time?
see, I don't know. I know that, and we'll get to this, but I know that when I finally came out to them much later in life, there was no, at least for my parents, there wasn't so much well, this isn't exactly breaking news. Because in my mind, I did get a lot of that from a lot of other people in my life. But with my parents, I think that they had thought that if I felt or I knew that I was gay, that that is something they would have known at an earlier age. So to be honest with you, when I had come out to my parents, I knew I had their support, but I think that my mom specifically, I'm just going to say it anyway, was was hurt actually because I felt that I couldn't come and have that conversation with her when I was younger.
Oh, I can understand that. Yeah, of course. Especially as a parent, I think you want to like create that safe space for your child, right? And then when they don't come to you and tell you these things, and of
Yeah.
course it's going to be, I mean, it's a selfish feeling as a parent, right? Because it's not about us. It's definitely about like the kid and what they're going through. But I can definitely respect how your mom may have had that moment of like, shoot, I wish you would have come to me and I would have been able to support you earlier.
But the thing is, without diving too much into it, like my mom and I have always had a very interesting relationship.
Right. Yeah.
So who knows, like maybe, and I'm not putting it on anyone, but I'm just saying that, maybe there was some reasoning behind that I never came out until later because I was scared, obviously I was concerned on how people would react to that. My dad, like as much as I'm a talker, my dad's not the chattiest person in the room, so I knew he was supportive and I knew he had always accepted me because one beautiful thing about my dad is that even though I really could have cared less about playing hockey or doing good at sports and all those like stereotypical straight male things, my dad always embraced, and my mom too, but my dad, especially for like a man at that time, like really embraced the things that I was interested in.
Oh, that's nice. That's wonderful. I love that.
And even still, like he would, if I wanted to like listen to music as we got breakfast ready in the morning or talk about, random pop culture things, right? Half of which he probably, could have cared less about. But, he really he always showed an interest in what I was interested in, which obviously doesn't have anything to do with my sexuality. But if I wasn't, wanting to talk about, what was happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I was more so wanting to talk about, okay, did you happen to see 90210 last night?
Oh my God. I think that has to do with your sexuality though,
I
because it
mean,
has to
yeah,
do with your like full identity, right? The way that you're presenting, the way that you're
yeah,
identifying, the way that you're coming into this world, right? Whether it's you're talking about whether or not like you like a guy or not. Obviously, your dad wasn't in those
yeah.
conversations at the time, but it's still your whole being. And the fact that you were able to feel comfortable and you didn't have to put on a show, like you didn't have to pretend to like hockey, but you were able to say, oh my gosh, did you see 90210? That's really important. That's a great relationship to have with your dad.
It is, and it still is. And I think that, I mean, listen, like it was quite a while after that when I actually came out, but I remember just certain things if I look back at my childhood where I was like, okay, like, you know, I'm sure most people who know me or knew me were not all that surprised as much as, and I'm sure a lot of other people, in the LGBT community have been through this as well. Like we're trying so hard to not let people know, right? Because we're trying, whether it's like we're not ready to accept it or we're not ready to share it. Like we are just trying so damn hard,
Yeah.
right? That's why they call people in our community like masters of deflection, right? Which we are, because we know what you can ask a question and we'll find any way possible to answer your question with a question, right? And I mean, I was doing it and I didn't even that's the thing. I was doing it and like even up until right before I came out, and I didn't even freaking realize I was doing it.
You had no idea. Okay, but you dated women before you came out. And
Yeah.
was that like, did you feel like that was a way of like pretending that everything was like normal, quote unquote? Or like
Yeah.
were you actually interested in these women? I mean, I feel bad, like don't tell, don't say that you weren't interested in these women, but
No, you know what? The funny thing is I did have some girlfriends when I was in high school, and specifically remembering two specific girlfriends that I had had. And I think at that time, if I'm being honest with you, I wasn't even able to process what it was that I was going through. And I wasn't even, it's almost like, even if I was like, seeing something on TV or seeing something in the media, I was almost in that mindset, I think, where I was like, okay, like, yeah, maybe I find him attractive, but I can also find she's beautiful too. So it was almost justifying it in my head. So when it came time to having a girlfriend at 16 or whatever it was, um, I mean, obviously, our relationship was more of a best friendship, like what now would be described as like besties, right? Even if you were affectionate, or even if you were kissing, or even if you were doing things like that, it was. And it's funny because specifically this one girl that I'm thinking about right now, she definitely experimented in her life since too. Like I know that she was
oh,
with women, was with men, has kind of, I don't even know how she would identify herself. I was very young at the time we had that relationship and it like didn't end well, but it was like she had her own stuff that she was going through, which was actually in some ways quite heavier than what I was going through. Yeah, so it was like we've actually spoken in the years since, we kind of chuckle at it, and she's always like, you know, she's super sweet and she's like cheering me on some things that have happened in my career that I'm doing on social media. Like she's like, I love seeing kind of you shine, right? So, and
awesome.
then there was another woman, girl, who I dated right after that, and that was short lived. But
And in
again, like I
your
just
20s? Did you date anyone in your 20s after that?
so that's the funny thing. So I did, like, I remember, it's so funny. Like I remember, and I did date or go on dates with women even after those two women, one of which who was still one of my closest friends, one
Love
of my closest
that.
girlfriends, from high school. And I remember like we went to the movie, and she's stunning, right? This is like the definition of like, okay, like I'm kind of confused because like you are stunning, but like not in that way. But at the time I'm like, well, yeah, you in that way, right? Like in my, I think you almost play, your mind plays tricks on you.
Of course.
And we went to the movies, and I mean, we never really did anything, but we probably watched the movie, and my hand was here, her hand was over there. um
Oh my God.
and then I do remember, so before I went to college, I spent a year at university, and there was a girl who again is still a friend of mine, who I it's weird when you think about it like this, because I definitely feel like I had feelings for her, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was like, and I remember being upset when like she just probably knew when she wasn't interested, she wasn't as interested in me as I was in her. She ended up seeing somebody else who she ended up later on in life marrying. And again, I've spoken to her over the years as well. She is absolutely lovely. And then one of the last girls I remember dating, um and this was in my 20s, and not even dating. I think we had went out once or twice, or someone was like, you should, talk to my friend Will. And it was almost like we had people almost setting us up. Actually, no, there's a couple of women like that now that I think about it. And it was like, at that point, like I was just feeling like I think I was maturing in that way. And I was realizing there was like no spark for a reason in that sense. Like I was like, okay, like we would go out and go on a date, and it was very much like, okay, like people, of course, people want to know, how did your date go? Did you like her? Did you find her attractive? Did you have a lot in common? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, it was all right. Well, I think we now know why.
Now we know why. Now we know why you were a little bit bored and maybe not so excited about it. Did you know during that time, though, when you were dating all these girls and like going out on these dates, like, was it just kind of like an inkling of like, oh, something's different? Or did you know and you just weren't coming out to everyone yet?
At that point, and I know it's so hard for people to understand, but I think that at that point, especially when I was in my like early 20s, I
Mhm.
think that I hadn't accepted myself. I don't even know that I fully knew, but I also don't even know that I'd fully accepted myself as someone who was gay.
Okay.
And I don't know that I I don't know that I necessarily felt like I had a lot of strong gay
Mhm.
LGBT role models surrounding me.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, yeah, like early on, like I say early in my 20s, I don't think, and I know it sounds so like if anyone's a teenager or a child listening to this right now, they're like, that's crazy. Like, how would you not know? I think I almost at that time too, because I was just starting out my career in radio. I think I heavily, and I don't know if this is something that you hear like in your sessions, but I heavily poured myself into my career. And I
Yeah.
was like, this has to, like, I have to make this happen. I
Yeah.
have to be successful. By the time I was in my career, I do remember thinking like, okay, because this is at a time where like you didn't necessarily, I know it's still the case in a lot of cases, but I thought that if people knew that I was gay, that that would affect me getting jobs. And I was in an industry that's hard enough to find a job anyway, let alone when you're in front of a mic or in front of a camera. And I thought that that might actually affect like the success of my career at that time.
Yeah. I think that's actually really important to point out because I think sometimes we forget how hard it was to come out in the 90s and the early 2000s. Like we look back now and it's like, oh, it was like super easy and we were all like accepting and whatever, but we weren't. It wasn't like that. And I think if we think, like you said, you came out when you were 30, right?
Yeah, I think I was actually trying to think about, like this sounds funny. I was trying to think about exactly. I think I might have been 31,
Okay.
but early 30s either way,
Yeah.
right?
So that would have been
And
like what? How long ago now? Like that would have been,
I mean that was like yesterday since
that was
I'm 32.
yesterday. Dude, it feels
No,
like yesterday, last weekend. You're
I
welcome.
mean,
20 years old.
no, in all honesty, that was about like 14, 15 years ago, right? So
And that is a long time, right? And that was a long, like it was a very different time. And I know that sounds kind of like we're aging ourselves, but it was a different time to come out. And I can understand
Mhm.
why that would have been nerve-wracking for you to do that. And we didn't have as many people talking about it or even like telling us what to say it, how to explore, all those things. So I can fully understand why it would be difficult. And you're right, unfortunately, the job market did judge us, right? For
Yeah.
being female, for being gay, for being an immigrant, whatever, right? Like we were in a very different time.
Very different time, and I think that as I sit here and I talk to you about dating these women,
Yeah.
this has come up. I've never actually like I'm a gold star gay. I'm a gold star gay. Actually, I'm more platinum, honey.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't want. You get asked that question. I have no problem sharing that. I have nothing to hide with that.
Yeah.
But I was trying. It's so funny because you talk about here how we have to remember the time, and we have to remember how you would have been feeling 15 years ago or whatever it is, and like 15 plus years ago. Sometimes now that I have been authentically myself and comfortable in my own skin for so many years at this point, and apparently just put everything out there, um, I have to remind myself, like it's hard, but I have to remind myself of the place that I was at that point. Because I think that when you blossom and you grow and you learn to accept yourself and you're comfortable in your own skin, you, I don't know, for me anyways, I really have to remind myself how painful that was, how upset I was, how emotional, the emotions that kind of came with it, how scared I was, right? Like, I mean, I was truly, as much as I have this family who I know loves me and I know supports me and all of these things, I was like going online and I was like looking up like what are the chances of your family, and this might be painful for them to hear if they hear it, like if they will disown you because of this. Knowing that when I was, because I was actually I've lived in the city I live in a couple times, but I was like driving down the highway to go tell my family, and I had a plan. It was like the one weekend I'm telling my sisters because I need to have my support. The next weekend, I'm telling my parents. And I remember thinking, like, driving down the highway going back home and thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm leaving here on Friday. When I come back on Sunday, they're going to hurt. Like, when I come back up the same highway that I'm going down, it's going to be out there. And it's like, for me, it was such I joke, but it really was like a coming out tour, because I think that a lot of people were surprised because I am someone, even before I was out, who was very forthcoming and very open and, would say things to my friends and had all these close relationships. But, I was obviously extremely guarded and protective of my own personal stuff.
Of course. Do you remember the first person you told? Who was the first person you came out to?
Like in person?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, like what do you mean what do you mean in person?
No, I mean that like prior to actually coming out to my family, I definitely connected, because I'd obviously like, so I was, I mean, okay, I want to answer this in two ways.
Yeah.
So I was in a relationship in secrecy for 7, 8 months and told nobody before I actually came out to my family. Nobody knew.
Wow. Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, so I had moved to Barrie,
Yeah.
which is the city I live in, just north of Toronto. If you don't know where it is, and you're listening to the podcast. And I had just gotten a job up here, and I ended up messaging with another person who was working in media in this market at the time. And
Wow.
I was just like, okay, like Pete, you're on the radio, people are messaging you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. This guy is in the same industry that I am in. And he had asked me out a couple of times, and I initially had said no
Right.
back then. I think that was kind of twofold because number one, I had oops, that didn't affect my mic too much. I'm a hand talker, so that's why, and I guess I maybe even like a little bit nervous. But I had, he had asked me out a couple of times, and I think it was the second time or third time he asked me out, and I did say yes, but I had my sort of stipulations about it.
Okay.
Like in terms of like I was like, okay, like knowing that he was also in the media, I was like, where are we gonna be, where are we gonna go, is it gonna be out, is it gonna be in, like what are we gonna do, like I mean I was kind of like losing it, right? And because I was scared, I was
Of
still very
course.
very scared and was not sharing it with anyone.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I was kind of living a bit of a double life because I had just moved back to Ontario after a stint in northern Alberta, trying to like get some skills, which that's another story. Um, in my career, and I was living with one of my sisters, so I would leave my sister's place, go to work, and often spend the weekend at the time my boyfriend's place, and nobody knew.
Oh, wow. So you were
Nobody
living
knew.
complete
Nobody knew.
secret.
But that relationship, and so at the time we started this relationship, he was out and had been out for several years and had been out at a young age. He was a few years older than me.
Yeah.
It started out in a situation of, okay, you know what, like I'm okay with it, I'm fine knowing that you're not out, because I think you seem like a great guy and you seem like to be very loved. And you know what? Like, as long as it takes, we will kind of work through this, right? And then, I mean, and now as someone who is out and has been out for years, I do understand the other side better. Initially, I was pretty hurt and heartbroken by it, but he obviously ended up breaking up with me because we had been together for months at that point. I still hadn't come out. That was hard for him. Um, so then that relationship ended, and I was just like, oh my God, I just went through this relationship. I am heartbroken at the time. Because it was like my first true real boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't live like this. Like, I can't live in secrecy. I can't live in hiding. And like, why am I doing this? Right.
Yeah.
So then I just was like, I have to find a way to come out to at least my family or people who are close to me before the next time I'm in a relationship, because it was exhausting. Like, it was just like I couldn't keep track of who I was telling what to. And for whatever reason, I put that upon myself to hide that.
Yeah, and you weren't being true to who you were, right? So like there's that like conflict within you of being torn of I love this person that I'm becoming, but I haven't told my past people, and then you're just torn between the two, and that's heartbreaking that you had to put yourself through that situation.
And I mean, it was, and it's been years now, and I did, and you're right. I'm the one who put myself through this situation. Nobody else did. I own up to that completely. Um, but I knew I had work to do. I knew I had work to do on myself. I didn't even know how I was going to do it. Maybe if I was going through this right now, I would have just immediately went to therapy. But it was more a lot, I don't know, it was more a lot of like soul searching, if
Okay.
that makes sense, at like a young age, I guess, or trying to figure out how I was going to be able to come to it. Um, and yeah, I did actually have a friend who I connected with online, and he actually really never pushed anything out of me. He was also gay, but and he was kind of removed from obviously my inner circle of close family and friends, and he really helped walk me through that process. And yeah, like he really did. And it was and I felt more seen in terms of like I related to him also being gay, and I saw myself more say in him than I did in like other people in my life who I knew were gay, right? Like um
So
and he yeah.
how did it feel once you did come out, when you sat there with your parents and like told them the truth? How did that feel for you?
Well, like I said, first of all, I went down and I have twin sisters, and
Yes.
I told my sisters.
Okay.
I think my one sister, well, we were in a parking lot at a Tim Hortons. I remember this. My heart was beating so fast. And then I remember like saying, okay, so I want to tell you something. I know I gotta go home. I gotta go to my other sister's place, but here it is. And it was like, I don't know if my heart has ever beat that fast ever. And I told her, and she cried and I cried, and it was like tears of joy, and then she hugged me. Yeah, it was emotional. And then it was very, very, very emotional. And it was like, love you, I'm so sorry that you felt like you weren't able to share the story earlier. Um and just even talking about it, I can picture that exact moment and how emotional we both were. And then it was like, okay, dry the eyes, because I have to go to my other sister's house and tell my other sister,
Did
right?
it make it easier though, since you had already told? I mean, it's so I wanted to stop for a second because you're even getting emotional now of like remembering that moment that was so important to you, right? Because it's an important part of your story. It's an important part of your identity to be able to share that story with someone. I love that you still remember it and you still feel that heightened emotion during that story.
My stomach is actually in knots right now talking about it, because, and not that I'm uncomfortable sharing it because I agreed to do this with you, but just because it's not often like this far down the line that you go to revisit that. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
it's like
no,
when
for sure.
you know, I mean, for years now I've been out on, you know, publicly, like whether it was in a job, social media, I'm doing pride party shows and like podcasts. So it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of revisiting the past, which obviously is hard to do. The funny
Mm,
thing was when I went to my other sister place, it
mhm.
was a completely different experience.
Oh,
Good. It was great, but I remember sitting in her living room and telling her, still being just as nervous and, you know, face probably puffy from telling the other sister. And then I was trying to tell her, and you know, to know me is to know that sometimes it can take me a long time to get to my point. And I know that. If there's one thing about myself, I know myself very well, right?
oh my God.
And I hope that most of my friends love me for that part of me, because it's just, that's just how it can be. But and then so my brother-in-law, who I'm also very close with, he walked in the house, so he was obviously going to know too. And I think he had said something like what is it, like spit it out, like are you telling us, are you gay, like what's going on? I'm like, well, actually yes, I actually yes.
Wow, no way. So he just like put it out there, but as like a joke, like as like just tell us like, are you pregnant kind of thing. And then you're like, yes.
Exactly. And honestly, I know initially he felt so bad once I did say that's actually it. But I think looking back again, I appreciate the fact that, because if you know me, and you really know me, you know that even when I've been going through hard times in my life, I will always go to humor, right? Like I've been in a job that I couldn't stand. I've had, you know, friendships or relationships that all, you know, took the most out of me, but I will always, you know, I'll acknowledge the emotional, but I will always use humor as a form of coping, right?
Yeah.
So I actually appreciated that. Like some people might have been offended by that, but I actually totally appreciated that. And then it was like a whirlwind. It was okay. So, you know, got to pack up my bags for the weekend. And next weekend, we're going to continue the tour at mom and dad's house.
Oh my gosh. You know what though? I love that there was a relief of humor though, too, that your brother-in-law was just like, okay, are you going to tell us? And also just like, I feel like it was just normalized. It was like, just tell us what's going on. Like, it doesn't need to be a big deal. And then there was this like acceptance in that as well, right?
Well, and that's just it. And the thing is like, I obviously had really, the longer that I didn't share this with those closest to me, the more I know for years, Maria, years I had built up this fear, right? And
Mhm.
I was and I know that hurt some people who I love, who even could be hearing this now, right? But
Yeah.
and I'm not putting that on anyone else but myself.
Mhm.
But I know that I did it, right? I think it was a fear of not being accepted. I think it was a fear of not being liked or loved. You know, I knew people who were gay, who were out, who did not have happy endings, right? And I feared that. And I think that that's what, you know, because I've always held my family so close and to a high standard, I think that I was afraid of how my life was going to change.
Yeah.
Overall, I would say that with my coming out experience, um, it was good. Like it was, I feel like there was a couple of, do you want to talk about my parents or do you want to talk about some friends?
What do you think? What do you think is more important to share?
Yeah. Well, so I'll say this, like the next weekend, again, you know, I was nervous with my sisters,
Hmm.
but in our family, it's like we love our parents. We're close to our parents. Do not get me wrong, but my sisters are truly my best friends.
Hmm.
If you've ever seen this show, what's that show called? I can't think of it now that I'm talking about all this stuff. Oh my god, This Is Us, where they have like the
Oh
big
yeah.
three. Like
Yeah.
that's
I
us.
love
Like
that.
that's the three of us.
Oh
It's
wow.
like,
Okay.
yeah, that's our relationship. Like
Yeah.
it's like, you know, I feel like some people's families are either super close with your parents or super close with your siblings. And with us, it's one of like, it's kind of weird. People are like, because I hang out with my sisters like as if they're friends,
Yeah.
because they are friends. But some
Yeah.
people who aren't close with their siblings find that really weird. Anyways, again, getting off topic here. So telling my parents was the most terrifying, right? And I remember it was in May. I remember it. People were in my parents' backyard, just doing gardening, yard work, whatever. And I remember, I think there was something on TV or whatnot. And then my sisters were actually like gathering in my parents for me to kind of have this discussion, right?
Oh
And
my.
so, and that was me. I kind of put that on them because I was like, let's just do this in one shot. Okay, cool. And then so they came in and I told them. And then, I mean, I kind of alluded to it, but my mom, I think initially was hurt that I hadn't shared that with her earlier. My dad was quiet, which for like 30 seconds concerned me. But then
Mhm.
afterwards, I knew that, obviously the support was there. He's just a quiet man to begin with. And,
Yeah.
his actions over the years have definitely shown that I know he fully accepts me and who I am. And my mom does too. Um, I guess my mom said that, leave it to me to be dramatic. And I guess my mom had said that, like, she was worried that it was something, like, worried that I was sick,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
I'm scared.
sorry, didn't mean to set it up that way, but I guess it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
then
gosh.
family and, friends, for the most part, I'd say friends were amazing, and I don't think, to my knowledge, I lost any friends because of coming out. I remember one friend, more of a coworker at the time, had said to me, and this kind of bugged me, and I guess kind of still this mentality bugs me, where she's like, "I hope you're not gonna like change now." Like that was kind of like, you know. I'm like, and I think I was a smart ass. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be walking in with a feather boa now, and that's just what you're getting, right? I was like, it because in my mind I'm like, so what if I was? So what if I was? Right? That's what I
Yeah.
would want to be.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that was an offside, but other than that, honestly, like even my straight male friends were amazing. They're like, you're Will, like you're
Yeah.
Will. It's like that is
You
and
are, and that it doesn't matter what your sexuality
there
is.
was tears, there was jokes, there was we knew, there was all those things, there was acceptance. But my gosh, like after I'd finally done that to my close circle, like open that part of my heart up to them, heart and soul, I felt like my life began.
Oh, I love that. I love that phrase. Your life began. It's just like a huge sense of like relief.
I was like, I literally felt like my life began, and I felt like I felt like it was like, I wished I had done it earlier.
Oh, aw.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
But I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. You were true
Yeah.
to who you were, right?
I didn't think I'd cry. Like, I really did.
No, of course. It's such an emotional topic, right? It's who you
Yeah.
are, it's your identity, and it's such a difficult thing to share, right?
Yeah.
Something so private and
Yeah.
personal for
But, it is true. And it's like, it's so true. And it's like, I think that's why I wanted to do this, why I have shared that part of me, on a podcast, in social media, on the air, because to have someone, and if I'm not for you, that's fine. Find someone else who is like, a radio host, a podcast host, a content creator, a
Yeah.
influencer, whatever, because there are people who probably are still afraid, definitely in other parts of the world. I mean, for the most part, Canada, we're lucky in a lot of ways, right? But I mean, there are so many places who still don't accept people for who they are. And that goes, that doesn't that's not just gay, that's, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, like 2S LGBTQ plus, right? And I think that that's why it's important to share your story and advocate, because I think that now more than ever we need to be doing this. And I mean, honestly, I'm also like, I really did not think I would get emotional because I was like, I feel like in some ways I've told this story in a lot of ways, but I also haven't necessarily shared it in such a long format. And it's funny when you revisit the, I guess that's therapy. It's funny when you revisit the you leave it to me to like put my therapy session on
Yeah,
the internet.
I
But
love it.
it yeah, that's, I don't know what to say. I'm mumbling. You
That's
ask me a
okay. Yeah,
question or tell
no.
me what
I love
to do.
that you're saying that though. The idea of like not being scared to actually be your authentic and true self is so important. And being true to yourself and allowing that relief. I think one thing you've said in other podcasts or in other episodes is this idea of if you're struggling to come out with your story because your family might not be accepting of who you are. I think what's beautiful about the community is that we have this wonderful thing about a chosen family. And so
Mhm.
I think that you've always said like how like you are like, you're privileged and you're like grateful that you had a family that accepted this, right? That like welcomed you with open arms. But I think a lot of us struggle with that. And especially as part of the community does struggle with like the ability to be accepted by our like actual blood family. And so I think something that's been beautiful is that idea of like really choosing a family that will accept you. And like, I think one of the things that stands out is that that organization, like the mom hugs or whatever, where it's like
Hmm.
if your mom didn't hug you when you came out, I'll hug you like for her. And I think those are beautiful organizations and those exist. So if you're scared, if you're listening now and you're scared and you're nervous about coming out and you don't think your family's going to accept you, just know that there is a like a giant chosen family that will, and that they will support you.
That's a great point. And I mean, I think one of the organizations that I know has done that during Pride events is PFLAG. They actually will have their booth set up, whether it's Toronto Pride or wherever your local Pride is, and they'll offer that up to you. I sit on the board of directors of an organization in Simcoe, Muskoka called the Gilbert Center.
Yeah.
Similar thing. And there's so many great organizations out there that you can look into and so much research, especially, we have to talk about it, especially if you are in danger, whether you're in danger of, hurting yourself, if you're suicidal. There are, again, another important reason why I think sharing these stories are so important. There are resources out there. There's Kids Help Phone. There's so many different outlets, and maybe I didn't use some of those resources, but maybe you feel like you need to. They're all so important. So I think that that's something worth
Yeah.
mentioning.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Will, as we finish up today's episode, what's your last sip? What would you say to someone that hasn't come out? Maybe they are older, maybe they have been waiting all this time. They are in their 30s or 40s or even 50s. What would you say to them from your experience of coming out as an older adult? What would you say?
I know it's never too late. And I think that it's so important to do it not when someone tells you to do it, but when you are ready to do it, and you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it in your stomach. It's like me. Like I felt, yes, even in hindsight, you saw me get emotional about it or heard me get emotional about it. And I talked about, I maybe in hindsight, I wish I would have done it earlier, but I also had the belief that for me, I think I did it at the right time for me because I was ready, and you have to be
Yeah.
ready to do it. If you want to share it, whether, some people don't want to share it, some people just want to exist, and that's okay too. You have to do what works for you. But once you step into your true skin, your true authentic self, and I know those are words that get overused, you'll be unstoppable. Like it's true. You'll be like me, and you'll just be like, I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I'm just going to live my life and just embrace it. And those who are on board will stay on board and will love me for me. And those who don't, I never needed them anyway.
It's so true. I love that last sip. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I do know that it's probably touched a lot of people's hearts. And I think even as a therapist, I will say you've probably saved a lot of people from some fear and some anguish and nervousness. And hey, you never know, right? You've maybe saved someone being able to like come out in like a confident, authentic way. So thank you for honoring us with your coming out story today.
I appreciate you, Maria, for making me feel comfortable to share it. And thank you so much for listening. Spill the Tea podcast. And that's the very gay tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for more candid conversations. Got a burning question or topic you want us to cover? Slide into our DMs. We're always here to spill the tea. Follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod, at Will Nash on Air, and at Sex Off the Pedestal.